Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in into this conversation about the software-defined vehicle, the next wave. So in the first wave, it was all about making the vehicle programmable, but it didn't really seem to take up speed, we have to say. So let's find out what is happening in the next wave. And for this, I have a very special guest here, and I'm very happy to welcome Florian Bancolai, Chief Digital Officer at Bosch Mobility. It's great to have you, Florian.
Thanks a lot for having me.
So we're just talking about the first wave and that it sort of stayed a little bit behind expectations, we have to say. So now the industry seems to have taken decisive steps towards software-defined mobility. So what has happened?
It's a very good point. I would say a couple of years ago, the question was, can vehicles become software-defined? So there was a question mark around it. And now when you look at it, what has happened, the question has been answered. Because we know over-the-air updates are there. Vehicles are programmable. You can see even now AI has entered the vehicle. So it's not a question anymore whether vehicles can become software-defined. They already have technical foundation, the capabilities are available. So that's why we are now talking about, okay, what comes next? What happens on top of the basic foundational capabilities?
But that means, Florian, that now you have to deliver. I mean, come on, now we really have to take up speed. So if the first wave was with a question mark, yes, can we make it software defined? And it is, yes, with 2 exclamation marks, this foundation is set. Mm-hmm. So what defines the next wave?
The next wave is defined by how do we make it scalable? How do we improve the customer experience with that? And I see there are 2 things, there are 2 shifts in there. So one is, how do we industrialize the software-defined vehicle lifecycle? Because we're moving towards the lifecycle. And the second one is, how do we bring AI into that? Because there's the rise of the so-called AI-defined vehicle. And these are the 2 major shifts that we see now in the second wave, in the second phase, which is also what we're addressing in our bootleg.
So it's 2 developments which are interlinked, of course, but it's 2 parallel processes.
Yes.
So if you talk about life cycle, what actually do you mean? Because if I, as an external, look at automotive life cycles, there are so many. There's the life cycle of the hardware, software, of the features. Could you put that into place?
Absolutely, and you're fully right. There are many life cycles that are interlocked and overlapping. But when we talk about this SDV life cycle, what we mean by it is there's a significant shift in how you develop a vehicle, but also how you market a vehicle. And I'll be a bit more specific. So prior to the SDV, if I look at it from a manufacturer point of view, as well as from a tier 1 point of view, when the vehicle was finished, so when it came off the production line, that was the end of the evolution for the vehicle. So it left, and this was, in that case, probably the best state the vehicle would ever be in. Now, if you're with the software-defined vehicle, this paradigm fundamentally changes, because the moment the vehicle leaves the production line is the worst state the vehicle will ever be in. Why? Because over the life cycle, there will be over-the-air updates. There'll be new capabilities added. There'll be personalization exactly for you, features that are adapted to your lifestyle, to what you want. So the vehicle from a consumer point of view improves. But if I look now to the ones that are providing this experience, the life cycle, so the product life cycle for you changes, because now you have to think about, okay, how can I increase the features? How can I improve the customer experience while the vehicle is in use? What can I do while in use? So that's why the life cycle changes, and it's a different new life cycle that we're adding to this automotive, I would say, ecosystem and universe.
So if I get you right, actually, the car is another space of working and living for me, and it could adapt to my changing
Yes.
requirements over time.
Yes.
So it would still be the same hardware,
Yes.
but as software-defined vehicle next wave tells us, I could make it be a perfect fit.
Absolutely. That is the target. So this is what we mean when we talk about the life cycle, and also when we talk about value add, new value creation along this life cycle. And there are several features that we're also introducing, and several, I would say, aspects. For example, when we talk about SDV features. So this is the layer where you have the customer experience. This is what really how to experience it. But then we have things, for example, like the SDV OS, which then provides the operating system in order to run these features. We have the SDV suite, which makes this engineering possible along this life cycle, because of course then you have continuous development, you have continuous deployment, you have continuous testing. That's why we need virtualization and the virtualization hub, which we introduce as a concept. So you have not very long cycles, but very short development cycles due to virtualization, where there are things like agentic coding, which come in AI on the product side. So we can improve also there the efficiency in terms of these things. And lastly, there's things like observability, which is, I don't want to call it monitoring, but in the essence, it is, we need to know what happens and where also issues happen. Also for security reasons, we need to look at it so we can keep people safe, secure, and with a stellar experience.
So I see there's also different levels of
Yes.
security or safety, obviously. This is not a one technology thing.
No.
You need really, you said SDV suite, SDV features, SDV OS to manage everything.
Yes.
And also different things need to be managed differently, like entertainment would be something else.
Yes.
Than whether the brake works or not.
Absolutely.
So what different, let's say, frameworks did you apply for safety critical issues?
So basically, when we look at it, there is, of course, you have a system level security aspect which you look at, because there is product liability, and yes, everybody wants to keep the consumers, the users safe. But then, as you rightfully said, there is already established levels of security, like for example, ASIL B, ASIL D, as monikers in the automotive industry saying, depending on where we are acting, the level of governance, safety, and security is also different, because there are different requirements. You've mentioned, for example, the infotainment area, where we usually have ASIL B or QM, which means we have more flexibility in that space, because I like to call it the blast radius. Why? Because the impact is limited. Okay, if my screen in my car doesn't work anymore, it is a nuisance, that's true, but it's not safety critical. So there I can also iterate faster. I have a different level of testing that I need to do. As opposed to, you've mentioned it, on the brake systems, there's zero compromise. Independent of whether I do it over the life cycle or before the vehicle is produced, the safety level stays the same, because this is safety critical. So there's absolutely zero compromise, and there we are an ASIL D.
So this has to be absolutely bulletproof.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You said that a lot of testing moves to the virtual.
Yes.
A lot of coding is sped up by AI. So if we talk about about time savings, how much does that make? How much time do we spend? How fast can we get?
The time saving is significant. What we see already, what we can see in the first deployment. So to make it a bit tangible, I take a customer example, which I had a few months ago when I was talking to the customer who said, I have a variant of a hardware with a slight software change. And in order to test that, I have 700 test cases. And for each test case, I need a testing rig and 2 engineers for about 3 days.
Yes. Okay.
So we can do the math. That is a massive testing, he says, and it's not such a big change. Now, if I move that, I can move 90% of that testing to a virtual reality. So yes, I have costs because I have a cloud compute, but I shorten the time because I can parallelize all tests. So it's not sequential 3 days in a row, but I can run all these tests in parallel. And then I do the final checkup. Yes, there is still some real world testing, which we do, but based on credible results where we have physically accurate representation in our modeling. And with that, I can save time and cost. And additionally, I increase the speed of development. So when I put it into figures, we have heard usually it used to be 48 months, so 36, 48 months, sometimes longer for a vehicle to be released. We have similar timelines when we have vehicle variants, a bit shorter but similar. And when we virtualize and go all in, we can go down to 12 to 24 months. It is an extreme scenario, but we can go there, and we have seen that it is technically possible. It requires a lot along the whole value chain. But if we only look to China, just to give that example, and how many variants are coming there very quickly, mostly from newly established companies, they are following this principle in the most radical form.
So they really cut time down by 2/3 or even 3/4.
Yes.
That is an amazing step.
Absolutely.
I mean, all this, if I get it right, is still work in progress. It will remain work in progress.
It will remain, I fully agree.
But still, it still needs to grow to develop its full potential. So, could you talk more about the state of the art, or the status quo we have now, and where you hope to be, let's say, in 5 years?
Happy to do so. So where are we now? What I mentioned in the beginning is we're entering the second wave, the next phase. So software-defined vehicle, software-defined mobility is real, it's there. And now it's about scaling that. It's about driving the use cases, the customer value. And we can see spread all over the industry, people are really moving towards it. And what is very positive, which I can see over the past year in nearly every customer discussion we have, when we built on what I explained earlier with SDV features, SDV OS, SDV suite, and the surrounding, the scaffolding, for example, observability or agentic engineering, there's a broad reception because every customer, so every car manufacturer is thinking about that. They have started something. So we have really valuable discussions, encountering real problems and an increasing adoption, not only from the manufacturers, but also when I now look into the partner discussions, so people in the ecosystem are equally receptive. There is a, I would say, broad consensus that now is the time to really move forward in the second wave with software-defined mobility, with AI-defined vehicles, and everybody's pushing towards it because it's also not one company who will solve that. Not a single company can do it alone, but we have to do it in partnerships, in ecosystems, and we're ready for it now.
And this is really a significant change, because when I look at OEMs or first-tier suppliers, it seems that they are not so anxious anymore to collaborate, to embrace open source platforms and all that. So the time's ready, really. I want to dive a little bit deeper into the AI-defined vehicle because that's developing in parallel. What does AI-defined vehicle mean beyond simply adding the AI features?
Yeah. It's a very good question because the AI-defined vehicle has several dimensions. And you mentioned one, there's the features which you can experience, like I can talk to my car, and it's more smart than a simple voice recognition. But basically, there's 3 dimensions when we talk about the AI-defined vehicle, when we look at it. So one is the AI in product. That's what we just talked about. So, for example, AI in cockpit, so I can talk to my car, it is receptive to the context. The second thing is the AI in the life cycle. So that's what we mean when we look into the engineering of the AI. So how do we move and can improve also the time reductions. And the third aspect is AI in governance. So we talked already about trust and safety. So really capturing that part, ensuring trust, safety, and accountability overall, not only in product, also in the life cycle. So we have a wrapper that does it. So these are the 3 main dimensions that we have that enable us to go to the next level.
And how do you see AI change engineering, validation, operations, release, confidence, everything? What influence will AI have?
I believe it is massive. Why do I believe that? I believe it is massive because you're not simply bolting on AI into an existing structure. Now, let's start with coding. Many people, I have played a lot with the coding assistants. And when you scale that beyond the individual to a team or even to multi-teams, it is not the same way you work. the way how you work changes with these coding assistants, the way you engineer changes. For example, what we say is you do a lot of front loading. So it's not the coding itself. Actually, the cost of code in time and cost are near to zero because it's done instantly. The real costs go into now, how do you design the system? How do you shape the requirements? Because all of that has to be done upfront. And then at the end of the day, at the other end of the tail, how do you test it? How do you validate it? How do you ensure trust and safety? So this changes your engineering workflow. This changes your design workflow, your product management workflow. Thus, it changes the way you collaborate in order to leverage it. So it changes everything.
It really is a whole organism. Yeah,
Yes.
so you cannot separate anything from anything. All right, then. But here, a question that separates. What separates an impressive SDV demo from something that OEMs can really trust? Because we know that this trust has developed. You know, we need to count on it across programs, across markets, and across fleets.
Yeah. I would say the big difference is a demo, say, is quickly done, but it cannot scale to reality. It cannot scale into production. So what separates a demo from something tangible is, have you built in the framework, for example, model-based system engineering? Have you built in observability? Have you built in ML ops so you can scale? So have you built in the necessary guardrails, the framework, the scaffolding that you need? So once the demo runs well and the customer comes and says, this is fantastic, I want to see this in production, you're not in the state where you say, okay, but actually we need to redo it for 6 months before we can scale. But
That's very
so
true.
that's really
Yeah.
important that
Okay.
the architecture foundation, the guardrails, the scaffolding are there from day one. Don't overdo it, but make sure it's a solid foundation so you can scale.
Thank you very much. That really makes a lot of sense. So another thing, as we are rounding this conversation off, which I really, really am enjoying, you brought a little booklet.
I did.
Yes, you did. And you were one of the publishers. Yeah, you did. I think you did it with two other
Yes, I did.
guys.
I did it with Alexander von Raya and Søren Wilderman. And Dirk Slammer helped us as an editor.
Okay, so why is now not only the right
Yeah.
time for the second wave, but also for this booklet?
For us, it was exactly the right point in time to publish it because, as I mentioned earlier, the software-defined vehicle and software-defined mobility are reality now. But then in all the discussions we have with manufacturers, with customers, there is a hesitation to say, but this is so rapidly developing. What are some principles? What are some beliefs that exist in the market which can serve as a baseline to work from? And that's why out of all these discussions, we distilled this in this book, SDV The Next Wave. So we can say, okay, here are our beliefs.
Yeah.
And there's many more contributors. So it's an ecosystem approach. So we talk to many partners, customers, tech companies who all contributed saying, here's a collection of the beliefs, how we think the next wave of software-defined mobility will play out, how we believe you can scale this, and how we can all create more value at the end for the end customer with this technology.
So it's also an invitation for
Absolutely.
further discussion and,
Yes.
as you said, the principles, the culture, the way you deal with things is evolving at the same time.
They are
Right?
involved.
So we're all learning.
It's a call to action. It's an invitation. It's a call to action. Let's shape this next phase of software-driven mobility together.
And everybody who's listening, you can get this book
Yes, you can get this book today
today.
at the BCW 26 at the booth of Digital Auto, or you go on the website and there you have an electronic copy of it.
So that's a no-brainer and not to be missed. Florian, I enjoyed this talk very, very much. I hope you enjoyed it too. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.